Hi, this is Ed, and welcome to a global TV talk show. And our very special guest today is Mr. Reiner Lomb, L-O-M-B. He's a retired business executive with Hewlett-Packard, and he's now an author and a coach. Reiner Lomb is the founder of Boomerang Coach, an executive coaching firm specializing in leadership and career development, innovation, and transformational change. Reiner Lomb's mission is to mobilize and develop leaders to create a more sustainable and positive future for all. As an executive coach, he works with leaders and change makers in a wide range of organizations, from startups and multinational companies to nonprofits and local communities, all who aspire to create transformational change. And this is really important, aspiring to make transformational change. Whether he's working with corporate executives, entrepreneurs, intrapreneurs, or indigenous tribal leaders, Reiner Lomb's clients appreciate his international business and cross-cultural leadership experience. He'll be joining us in just a few minutes, but I wanted to do this intro first so we can get right into the interview once it starts. Before he became an executive coach, Reiner Lomb, that's L-O-M-B, had a 30-plus year career in technology. He started and developed software businesses and led leadership development. Today, Reiner Lomb is here to offer wisdom from his new book, Aspire, A-S-P-I-R-E. Aspire, 7 Essential Emotions for Leading Positive Change, no matter where you are. In the book, he addressed the 7 critical emotions you must master if you are to be an effective and empowering leader who aspires to create positive change. His book, Aspire, leads us to discover how to positively influence key stakeholders, build trust, and lead with optimism. Ride the waves of negative emotions and mobilize people to take action and choose resiliency in the face of setbacks. That sounds pretty good, huh? In just a minute, you'll be meeting Mr. Reiner Lomb, and we're going to have a good time. Join us. Thank you. We're going to pause. So here we are with Mr. Reiner Lomb, that's L-O-M-B, and he is a very, very experienced big business guy. Also, he has had side hustles starting software companies, but for many years was Hewlett-Packard in software and heavily involved in developing leaders. Welcome, Reiner Lomb.
It's a pleasure to be here, Ed.
Thank you again for doing this. So I want you to hold up your book. It's called Aspire, A-S-P-I-R-E. And so this is different than Inspire. How is it different to you?
Yeah, really, I use the title Aspire to say, if you want to be a leader, if you really want to create change, then you need to aspire to be a leader, which is actually an emotion. You need to feel it inside, because many people that I have seen, they want to get promoted into leadership position, or they want to get elected to be a leader or whatever, but they not necessarily have the aspiration. They don't have the vision, or they have the higher aspirations. So I think that it's a fundamental requirement in order to lead, to be a good leader.
I want to zero in on the 7 emotions that you write about and go into quite detail. I mean, you're a guy, a male, strong guy, and yet you're talking about emotions. So, I mean, I know this is very avant-garde now, but, you know, everybody's trying to relate, right? So how, in your view, as a German, as a business leader, view emotions in this regard?
Yeah, it's for me, it was like leadership trainings and leadership skills, and so I have always been focused on behaviors. Okay, and as I was developing leaders and I was coaching leaders and also in my leadership roles, leading others, I was always very curious because, like many people, they would go to the trainings and they would try to learn these behaviors, but they would not sustain them. Right. So it was not so easy to learn a new leadership behavior the way we grow up and we learn things and we do, like we a little bit on autopilot into how we do things, but especially when later in life, right? When we, after university and we had a little bit of career and so on. So it was really a challenge. So I wanted really to understand what drives behavior. And there's a lot of, research that's been done all about, like, beliefs drive behavior, right? Our values drive our behaviors, our needs or unmet needs drive our behaviors. One thing that was always underestimated or not emphasized enough is emotions, because all the things that I just mentioned, they drive the emotions, and the emotions, we have been learning emotions through evolution, right? We have been learning fear when we see a tiger. We have been learning to show compassion or like toward or love towards when we bring up children and things like that, or compassion towards the people from our tribe. Otherwise we stick not together and we don't flourish and so on. So we have been learning those, and they're kind of like people have been taking them for granted but not consciously working with emotion. So my experience as a leader and as a leadership coach was like, once I tapped into emotions as a competence that can be learned, and that the latest research has shown that, suddenly things were much easier for people. I have a lot of examples that I use in the book actually as well, but I have examples that go beyond that, where people went through a true transformation in their ability to lead with confidence and be more resilient and also become more successful in achieving their goals. And because when you when you don't have to react to a specific situation, you can actually figure out, oh, this is how I'm feeling right now. What is the message of that? And can translate that into an emotion and shift into an emotion that is helpful in this particular moment, right? Like right now, I guess, through empathy with you, I guess that you are in the emotion of curiosity and interest.
Well, that's
That,
cool. So
that
how,
enables
what,
you to learn. So I can
yeah,
predict that you're learning right now. Now, if I would pick up another emotion that you have, let's say you would be bored, or you would be nervous or impatient, frustrated, you probably would not learn. You would probably not even listen to me right now.
right. There'd
So I
be a,
can,
opaqueness or something, a
if
blockage.
if I know what you're feeling, the emotion that you're feeling, I can predict your behavior.
So let me ask you about the negative. In your book, you talk about riding the waves of negative emotions. So, I mean, this is something that you get pissed off about, or something that you're really disappointed, or something that gets you angry.
Yeah,
So how? I mean, this is a complex device.
yeah.
So how would you describe that?
Well, negative emotions are not necessarily bad. They have also a message, right? So let's say we lose something or someone important to us. We might feel sadness or we might grieve. And that might open the door for asking, what's the meaning of this? And that might get us to a higher level of consciousness, for example.
Huh.
However, if we don't use that emotion as a gate to learning, if we use it just, if we get stuck in the grieving process and don't get out of it, if we get stuck in the sadness, or if we get stuck in the anger, it doesn't go away, then it's not serving our needs, right? Even anger is not a bad emotion, but because if we get angry, if we see something, we observe something that violates our values. So we can say, okay, I'm angry, and I can then make that conscious. Why am I angry? But I don't have to act on that anger immediately. I can actually understand what's the message. So riding the waves of negative emotions is kind of a flowery expression. But what it really means is that I can recognize those negative emotions. I can pick up what they tell me, and then I can choose what emotional state do I want to shift to that is more helpful in this moment. And specifically, research has shown that being in a state of positive emotions or cultivating more positive emotions and feelings makes us much more resilient to setbacks, to adversities, and that we all experience in our life.
Well, thank you for that deep dive. So I want to also ask you about the idea of the experience that you have of being a German, and Germany was divided, of course, and then the wall came down. And this is not negative at all. So this is elation, I guess, and happiness and optimism. Please go deeper.
Yeah, I use this example of the peaceful revolution in East Germany as a case study for showing and teaching how emotions work, how they can drive behavior at scale and can create a transformational change. So for leaders can use that knowledge and can learn to create such emotional shifts in order to create a larger scale change in organizations or outside of organizations. So that's why I share that story. Now, it is also very personal and powerful to me because it changed my life significantly. So I grew up in a divided country in Germany. I grew up on the western side of the border, very close to the border to the East Germany, the so-called Iron Curtain.
Yeah.
And my cousin Heinz, while I could speak up freely on my side of the border, my cousin Heinz on the other side of the border was executed just for speaking up. Okay, so that system in East Germany was very repressive. And still in 1989, that's the year when the wall came down, later in November, that summer, people in East Germany were still very pessimistic and had little hope that change is possible. Even with the rise of Gorbachev, that gave so much hope to all the Eastern European countries and people there. But in East Germany, it was still the old guard, people that had been in power for decades were suppressing. There was the Stasi, which is the secret police service that was spying on people, putting them in jail and all these things. So people were, when they demonstrated, they were picked up in the street, they were interviewed, they were put in jail, they were punished, and so on. However, so in the summer, still thousands of people were fleeing. A friend of mine, Anke Jan, who I describe in the book, was among them, an 18-year-old young woman. So they were fleeing through Hungary, mostly, not all of them, but also some other countries too, Czech Republic as well. But Hungary was the main part because the border was starting to have some holes, if you want. And so people were still fleeing in the thousands. However, that was in July, August. But in the beginning of September, with following the Monday, so-called Monday peace prayers in the St. Nikolai Church in Leipzig, where the whole peaceful revolution really started, people were after the peace prayers, they were demonstrating out in the street peacefully for freedom and democracy, freedom that they can travel to the West, and also for democracy that they can have free elections. And that was originally a very small group of people only in Leipzig. But Monday after Monday, in a very short amount of time, 5 to 6 weeks, that small number, this group of people grew to 70,000, 230,000,
wow,
to 320,000 on October 23rd, when more people were marching in the street than were watching from the windows. Leipzig was a city of 500,000 people, so 320,000 people were marching in the street while the police and the Secret Service, Stasi and so on, and they had also called on the army, the military to stop it, but they didn't intervene. So they were marching. The crowd was just too big that they could beat it down. That peaceful revolution, those demonstrations spilled over to other cities. So in cities around East Germany, millions of people were demonstrating peacefully. And on November 9th, a government official by accident announced in an international press conference that the border would be open that midnight. And it was like kind of not an official thing. So the border guard, his name was Harald Jäger, at the Bornholmer Straße border crossing, is one of the border crossings in Berlin, East Berlin to West Berlin. He was the supervisor at Bornholmer Straße border crossing at that night. He was just eating his sandwich in the cafeteria, and he didn't hardly take the first bite when he saw or heard that announcement, and he was totally shocked. And he was a 28 years Stasi member, so a hardcore person. And he called his supervisor and he said, forget it, you keep the border closed. If you don't listen to me, if you open the border, if you dare to open the border, you will have to live with the consequences. And he had children, he had a family and so on. So this was a threat to his putting him in jail or whatever, a punishment, losing his job, etc., etc. So this guy, Harald Jäger, he was sweating, and people came out of the houses. They pushed towards the border. They called, open the gate, open the gate. I mean, they yelled, open the gate, because they heard that announcement. His colleagues that he was supervising said, let's get out the machine guns to scare them off or to shoot at them or whatever. And he said, no, we're not going to do that. So after hours and hours of inner struggle, he finally decided to open the gate, to instruct his people to open the gate. And this is the pictures we saw around the world. Those who are old enough of your listeners, our listeners here, they saw the thousands and thousands of people in Berlin crossing the border and celebrating and climbing the wall and dismantling the wall slowly and having champagne bottles and beer bottles and whatever, and yelling and ecstatically celebrating, basically. Unbelievable. So that's the story where what made it possible, people lived in fear and hopelessness and pessimism that change was possible because they had been beaten down so many times. But that inner shift to optimism, person by person, and courage made them to go out into the streets from behind the curtains, join the movement, that it became so big that it could not be stopped. Okay, you could not, there was not enough police to, you cannot shoot down millions of people, right? It's impossible. So when as long as it was small, they could always put people in jail, they could scare them and so on, but when it became so big, they could not. So this is really an example where from inner emotional shift. And so as a leader, you can use that. If you tap into people's highest aspirations, which were freedom and democracy, free elections, that they can create a society in which they aspire to live in, that higher aspiration made them, mobilize them, that inspired them, that made them overcome their fear, that made them shift to optimism and to courage as well. Okay, but before, for many decades, people didn't have that optimism. They did not think change was possible.
So that guard, did he escape that night?
No, he was basically, he was at that night, he was believing that he might go to jail, or it was his job. He took the risk. He was interviewed because then the government pretty soon had to step back through the peaceful revolution. They were replaced through a younger guard. Everything dismantled very quickly. As we know now, in less than a year, Germany was reunified, which is a whole other story that I describe in Aspire in the book, which following this peaceful revolution that brought the wall down, then negotiations started between the Germans and the Allies in the West, as well as with the Soviet leader, with Gorbachev, about the possibility of reunification. And that is another example of where really the two leaders distrusted each other. So collaboration was actually initially not possible. It took a long time until really both made an effort. And it started with the Western leader, Helmut Kohl, who was the chancellor at that time, who reached out to him. He apologized for things he had said that it insulted Gorbachev and so on. And slowly they built trust with each other, and then they were able to seal the deal of the reunification. Because it was a big risk for both for the Allies in the West, but even more for the Soviet Union because of the history of Germany. This was the reason why Germany was divided, to weaken it so it could not start a war again. Right?
Got it. So you talk about struggles of leadership. You know, everybody has struggles at one time or another, but I'm just looking through the notes here. Leadership competencies and struggling. Would you like to address that issue? Because there's so many ways and different reasons for having a struggle, whether it's self-belief or blockages or somebody in the way or.
Yeah. When I ask people, so Aspire has, I distilled from over 200 emotions. I distilled the 7 most critical emotions, part of the 7 essential emotions for leading positive change.
Yes.
And then when I go into workshops or coaching, I try always to identify what is the weak spot of the leader. Where's the leader struggling with most? So sometimes I have a leader that cannot, that is not a visionary leader. They put out fires every day. They fix the issues of their teams or their organizations. They become micromanagers because out of fear that their people don't have the competence or they do things wrong and so on. So this is one big struggle, to be really a visionary leader, which includes also to be able to trust your people, right? Not to micromanage them, not to have too much control. So optimism is the gate, is the lens to becoming a visionary leader. If you are not optimistic, if you live too much in the past, too much in resentment, for example, or other emotions that keep you in the past, you cannot see possibilities for the future and you cannot pursue those possibilities. So you don't have the energy for it because your mind, your mental state is so occupied with these issues that happen in the past. We see that in politics very often, right? A lot of resentment that keeps people want to go back to the past, which we cannot go. You can never go back to the past. We have to go create a new vision for the future. It might include some elements from the past. We might take some values with us, but you cannot never recreate, the country you were living in or whatever. That time is past. Things change. Even like I've been gone 29 years from Germany, I have still nostalgia about how I grew up there. But when I visit there now, it's a different country.
Yeah, so
different.
you talk about the lens, L-E-N-S, the lens for visioning, and that's what you're referring to now.
Yes, optimism. And so in the book, I describe 2 types of optimism. So one is really very practical oriented. It's based on past experience. So we have, like, let's say I have let's say I coach a leadership team, and the people of the leader say, whenever I make a proposal, our leader, our manager, shutting it down because, and then when I talk to the leader, I said, well, it doesn't work. I haven't seen it work. In the past, it failed. Right? So then the people get frustrated. So that's one type of optimism that's based on past experience that's very practical oriented and so on. And that is not enough to be a visionary leader, because if you always look to the past, did it work in the past? You never try something new. What really the type of vision that the leader needs to cultivate is this dreaming, this things that have never been created, you don't even know if they're possible. So all these, let's say, new businesses like an Apple or Rise or Google, or let's say all of these companies or that I have been part of. I was part of a startup business in a Hewlett Packard. There was no software business. We dreamed of a software business, and I had to be dreaming as well to get up every morning and say, this is the vision that we have. And we wanted to build a multi-billion-dollar software, billion-dollar software business, because that was the number people were looking at that time. And I said, yeah, that's what I want to create. I want to be part of it. Is this possible? I have never seen it in my life. That no $1 billion software company existed at that moment. I definitely had not been part of it. I was too young. So I had to dream about it. But I also needed to have a little bit practical optimism as well. So I combine, when I coach leaders, when I facilitate innovation workshops to innovate, to be more innovative in the company, I combine both of these types of optimism to cultivate the dreaming of a new future, but then also to be practical in executing towards it.
So this led to your name, Boomerang Coach?
Boomerang Coach came as a metaphor when I wanted to mobilize, that's my mission. I want to mobilize leaders. I want to mobilize people to lead positive change, to make a positive impact in the world. I talked to hundreds, maybe thousands of people over all my career around the world. And people were like working on one thing they were not passionate about. And then when I said, what is it you would really like to do? There was always something different. And I said, why are you not doing it? And it was mostly fear, maybe it was financial fear or other fear. And so I developed a mission for myself, getting into coaching to mobilize leaders, so ignite their passion and return them to purpose. So the boomerang is a metaphor for returning to purpose.
And so all of this, to me now, I mean, a light just went on here in my head that, okay, so this is where you get all your energy.
Yes.
Because you were able, I can just imagine, let me jump off that track for a second. I'll get back to it. I can just imagine that in those early days, before the launching of HP software, I mean, you're dealing with hardware guys, right? Mostly guys.
Yes.
And engineers, right? And yet you're coming up with this software, and it really didn't, I can't think of the word right now. It didn't gel together. No. There's a great big business out there that's even bigger than hardware.
Yes, yeah, people were rejecting the idea. They were actually telling me, you're in the wrong place here. We don't do that. We don't do software here. I was originally a trained electrical engineer, hardware engineer, and computer science. I switched later to software because I saw the possibilities. I mean, a little bit with my coaching, I also go from the hardware to the software. I go from the behavior, but the observable things, the touchable, the tangible things, to the intangible, to the emotions, which is like our software that runs our behavior, right? That drives our behavior. So in this sense, there has been, in that time, you exactly understand it right. There was a lot of rejection and people objected the idea.
And so you were the visionary, or one of them, that says the software needs to be engineered. And it's not soft. I mean, it's money, big time, because so many people will be facilitated. They'll be able to do this even though they're not engineers. Yes.
And I tell you, like every change this goes back to change leadership, the emotional state. I can tell you the emotional state a leader is in, an entrepreneur, somebody that starts businesses with inside the company, entrepreneur is outside the company, and so on, new businesses. The emotional state is very important. Like we know, from popular culture that entrepreneurs are very passionate about what they're doing. I mean, they sacrifice, a lot. Maybe they sleep in a sleeping bag. Maybe they sleep in the office too.
This is what I do here on Global TV Talk Show.
You see, so you're an entrepreneur. You're passionate about what you're doing. I'm passionate about what I'm doing too. Otherwise, I could not do it with such an energy.
So the 7 emotions, I'm going to read them here. I'm looking at the notes. Empathy, the gate to caring. Compassion, the commitment to serving. In other words, the follow through. The interest, which is a drive, internal. And optimism, which is that lens, the visioning, seeing what nobody else is seeing. Inspiration is the energy for mobilizing yourself as well as others, right? Yes. Or getting the pieces together to help you enable that. And then the trust, in other words, the belief, self-belief?
Well, it's trust in yourself, obviously self-trust, but also trust in others, and facilitating as a leader, trust among the people that you're leading. right? You can have a role. In my leadership roles, very often I saw there was a mistrust between people,
Right.
and I could do things. I could facilitate the building of trust between people, which was making it then much easier for me as a leader not to intervene, to let people collaborate together effectively. And when distrust was present between people, my teams would not work effectively. I had always global teams, and distrust was easily there because people didn't know each other. They lived in different countries. Some had never met before. They talked over more the phone at that time. There was video was not as prominent yet. Available. It was available in specific locations and so
Yeah.
on. But I wanted to say trust building activities a leader can facilitate and can think of. And I'm describing in the book as well how that can be done. And one of them is to help people to get to know each other as human beings.
Okay, so does that mean you go to the beer hall and have pretzels?
Yeah, things like that. I would always fight with my management for a budget for bringing people together in different parts of the world. I would always rotate. I would have a global team, or sometimes would be in the US, sometimes would be in Europe, sometimes in Asia, and would do both work, like strategize together and develop plans but also activities that allow people to get to know each other, to do fun exercises together. We would maybe hike together, or we would put a game, or would have dinners or cook together, things like that, where you have enough time to talk to each other as a human being beyond work.
So all of that builds this thing called resilience. In other words, bullheadedness enough to plow through a problem.
Yeah, I think what builds resilience, what research shows, is if you are in a positive emotions, of you have positive interactions during the day. There's some scientists they have like a ratio of 3 to 1. If you have more negativity than 1 to 3, then you cannot be very resilient. And it's obvious. Let's say you climb a mountain and there's a storm coming, and you freak out and you shout and whatever. You have not a clear head to think what I'm going to do now. You're not going to be very resilient. You might get killed there because you might make the wrong decisions. The same is true for business too. If you stay in a positive emotions, or negative emotion will come up, but you don't stay in that emotional state. You're going to recognize it, think, what do I need to do now? And then try to shift to positive emotions like hope, optimism, that you can get out of that situation, for example, or interest. Let me understand what I need to do now.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is REINER
REINER
Lomb, L-O-M-B. The founder, I'm going to read this. The founder is of the Boomerang Coach, an executive coaching firm specializing in leadership and career development, innovation, and transformational change. Would you like to elaborate on that transformational change aspect?
Yeah, there's a transformation is really in two ways. It's one is their own transformation somebody goes through. We talked earlier about these essential emotional changes that somebody can go through. One is what I have observed, that people are transforming as human beings. So they become more effective, their relationships change. Let's say, if you develop empathy for others, if you develop compassion for others, right, as a leader, if you have the ability to nurture trust, right, which is a big issue. There's research out from Gallup that we have never been worse in terms of distrust in this country. Okay, now assume now we turn that around. We're creating these emotional shifts. We rebuild trust from where we are right now. So there's a personal transformation happening in you, how you relate to others, how you look at others, but there's also transformation going to happen in our organizations, in our communities, in our society. Okay.
Positive change, positive.
Yes, but it's a transformation really, because like and let's say I come into an organization and people don't collaborate. They work in silos. They don't trust each other. They're not effectively working together. They're not achieving their goals and so on. Okay, so that's the type of transformation that I'm talking about, that people changing the way they do things through relating differently to each other, through these new leadership skills, which then creates the transformation, but also externally, the company will be more successful. Not just internally, it feels better and people love each other more. It's also about results. And there's sure, we know that organizations, leaders that have nurture a culture of care, for example, perform much better than organizations that don't care.
And that helps recruitment and retention.
Yeah. That attracts talent. The same is true with trust. Organizations where trust is higher perform better. And that also, people want to work in an environment of trust. They want to have friends at work. They want to be able to talk to people, right? But if trust is not there, people will not openly talk or say things. And then issues are not surfaced. And when issues are not surfaced, they don't get addressed and not solved.
Reiner, thank you very much for doing this with me. And our audience worldwide will be seeing this in the coming days, weeks, and months as we circulate it and distribute this program through our network, LinkedIn primarily, but also Instagram and Facebook group, and our own long list. So once again, Aspire, ASPIRE. And you should hold up that book cover again, so people can see it on Amazon. And is Amazon the best place they should go?
Yeah, and the subtitle is important as well, because there's other Aspire books out there that are not related to that, but the subtitle is so it's Aspire: 7 Essential Emotions for Leading Positive Change, no matter where you are.
Or no matter who you are, too.
Yeah, it's the same sense. But it's on Amazon. It's available as print, as the ebook, as well as just the audiobook I launched just a couple of weeks ago.
Audio, that's cool. And is it you speaking, or do you have someone else doing that?
I had a professional actor speaking. Yeah.
Frankly, I think you should have done it yourself. Get the original edition here. Okay, this is very cool. So what is the website? BoomerangCoach.com or
no? My website is my first and last name, Reiner Lomb, so REINER LOMB, one word, .com.
Great. Thank you again for being my guest. Please come back and let's do it again in the new year.
You have to do that. Yeah, I enjoyed the conversation. Thank you so much for having me, Ed. It's always a pleasure.
It's my honor. Thank you. Someday we're going to meet in person somewhere.
Yeah, we'll do that.
Okay. Have a good one. Merry Christmas to you.
Yeah, same to you.
Thank you.
Same to you.
Thank you.